Hey guys, tonight marks the beginning of a journey not marked by speed or spectacle, but by a quiet unfolding, a gentle voyage across centuries, landscapes, and cultures. This is no tale of cannons or conquests. Instead, it is a patient unraveling of nature's deepest aromas, a meditation on the slow discovery of spices that once lay hidden in the shadows of the New World, now lining shelves in your kitchen, waiting to tell their story. Imagine yourself stepping lightly through dense, humid air, the kind that clings to your skin and carries the scent of things both familiar and foreign. You walk beneath towering trees, their leaves overlapping, in thick green layers, filtering sunlight into beams that feel almost sacred. The ground is soft beneath your feet, damp with centuries of fallen life. Around you, the buzz of insects weaves through the rustle of branches, and distant bird calls hint at lives unseen. You are alone, yet not truly alone. Every breeze carries whispers. Every shadow conceals something ancient. This is not the start of a battle, but the start of an awakening. The old world, for all its advancement and splendor, had grown hungry. Black pepper, cinnamon, and cloves, once rare, now staples, had become symbols of empire and commerce. But Europe's appetite had outpaced its gardens. The great powers turned their gaze outward, lured by rumors of lands brimming with exotic bounty. What they sought wasn't gold or silver, not always. Often they sought taste itself, the unknown, the untasted. By the early 1500s, ships began slipping quietly away from Iberian and Italian harbors, their sails heavy with ambition. These vessels, carved from oak and pine, were less war machines and more wandering homes. Their timbers swelled and groaned under pressure from the sea. Their crews learned to listen as much to the wind as to each other. Time aboard passed slowly. Days bled into nights, marked only by the changing rhythm of the waves and the creak of wood in motion. These expeditions were not swift. They moved at the pace of nature. Storms could halt them for weeks. Doldrums left them stranded, sails limp in a windless sky. There was no rushing discovery, no shortcut to knowledge. If the sea was mercurial, the land was even more enigmatic. When landfall came, it was often not with triumph, but with uncertainty. The shores of the Caribbean and the forests of Central America pulsed with life, but they offered few, easy answers. The explorers disembarked not onto blank maps, but into living, breathing ecosystems already understood by their inhabitants. Every tree, root, and berry had a story, just not one written in any European tongue. Among these early encounters, one of the most curious and enduring involved a spice later known as allspice. The Spanish called it pimienta because its small round berries reminded them of pepper. Yet its aroma defied simple labels. To some, it smelled of cloves. Others swore it was cinnamon or nutmeg. It was all of them, and none of them, a singular flavor that would come to enchant cooks across continents. And yet, it wasn't immediately celebrated. The allure of allspice crept slowly into European consciousness. Unlike gold, which glittered instantly, or silver, which could be weighed and counted, allspice revealed its value only to the patient. Botanists pressed its leaves into books. Apothecaries tested its uses, and cooks experimented cautiously with its strength. This was not the spice of immediate conquest. It was the spice of slow acceptance. Imagine those moments. A sailor, sunburned and salt-crusted, sampling a native dish flavored with something he cannot name. A scribe, pausing to sniff the contents of a cloth pouch and failing to find words adequate to describe it. A healer, handed a leaf by an indigenous guide, told it can soothe fever, but only if prepared correctly. These scenes rarely make it into history books, yet they are the moments where understanding began. The ships themselves became archives of scent. Below deck, the mingling of salt air, human sweat, and crushed leaves created a library of olfactory memory. Each barrel of unfamiliar bark or sealed jar of pungent berries became a message home, not in language, but in smell. The journey back was just as slow, often slower. Storms dragged ships off course. Hunger hollowed the crew. Still, the spices endured, tucked away in burlap and sealed glass, guarded like treasure. And perhaps that's the most striking truth of this tale. The real magic happened not in the grand proclamations, but in the silences between them. In the act of pausing, smelling, tasting. In the way early naturalists sketched a seed pod with reverence, or how a translator struggled to match indigenous words with Latin taxonomy. These were not explorers who conquered with speed, but who learned by watching and listening. Historians, of course, still debate the nature of these discoveries. Was it all blind luck, stumbling into the right grove at the right time? Or were there those who genuinely understood that the path to true knowledge winds through humility? The answer likely lies somewhere in the middle. The age of exploration was filled with both arrogance and awe, colonial greed and genuine curiosity. Yet despite the blood and ambition that often defined the era, the story of spice stands apart. It invites us to consider the power of patience. These plants refused to give up their secrets quickly. Their value couldn't be measured in coins alone. You had to live with them, taste them, return to them. So here you are now, centuries later, with a pantry that holds traces of those first quiet steps, a pinch of allspice, a jar of cinnamon, a bottle of peppercorns. Their journey was long. Their discovery was slow. But their story continues with every meal, every recipe, every moment when you pause and taste something layered, something deep. This is not a story to be rushed. It's not meant to be consumed in haste. It is a slow, fragrant unraveling, a tapestry woven from patience, observation, and wonder. You walk further now, the humid air wrapping gently around your body, carrying with it the warm, spicy breath of the allspice you passed moments ago. That scent lingers behind you like a subtle promise, an aromatic thread linking you to the path already traveled. With each careful step, the world ahead unfolds not in grand gestures, but in tiny revelations. A faint rustle of leaves, a flicker of movement in the corner of your eye, the way the earth shifts slightly beneath your feet. Overhead, the trees sway slowly, and with them the wind shifts, carrying whispers of seeds and pollen of ancient knowledge riding the breeze. These seeds, though weightless, hold destinies. One day some of them will take root in soils far from their origin, blooming in gardens and fields continents away. In these early encounters between the old world and the new, the natural world was a puzzle with no instructions. The plants that surrounded the first explorers, lush, aromatic, sometimes menacing, were wrapped in layers of both utility and myth. The unknown invited speculation, and speculation invited stories. A single strange berry might spark theories of sorcery or healing. A pungent root could be a gift from the gods, or a curse in disguise. It's easy now, centuries later, to underestimate the awe of those first meetings with unfamiliar flora. But to those early travelers, each tree, each vine, each fruit was a mystery not just to be solved, but slowly understood. You might picture the explorers walking hesitantly through thick foliage, pausing in fascination before a plant, with red-veined leaves or blossoms shaped like no flower they had ever seen. Their minds, trained in European categories, scrambled to classify these novelties. Often they couldn't. Instead, they turned to the people who had lived with these plants for generations. And so, in hushed exchanges beneath canopy shade or beside cooking fires, the first knowledge began to be shared. Imagine the moment, an indigenous elder, their voice low but assured, explaining how the bark of a certain tree could cool a fever, how seeds crushed between stones could flavor stews, or how a handful of leaves left under a sleeping mat might keep nightmares at bay. These were not grand lectures, but passing truths, passed gently. The explorers, scribes, and botanists did their best to listen, their hands busy sketching what they saw, their journals slowly filling with careful drawings, curious guesses, and half-understood instructions. These exchanges were as fragile as the petals you might brush with your fingertips, easily lost, impossible to replicate once broken. And yet, they were vital. For all their ships and instruments, the explorers would have been lost without local knowledge. They could map the stars, but not the forest. They could chart coastlines, but not identify what was edible, what was medicinal, or what was dangerous. The knowledge that flowed from indigenous hands into European journals was a lifeline wrapped in mystery. Of course, with such knowledge came legend. Myths traveled with the plants, as inseparable from them as their scent. One story told of a pepper so fiery it could call down rain or soothe a dying man's final breath, depending on how it was prepared. Another whispered of cinnamon trees watched over by forest spirits, who would curse those who harvested the bark without offering thanks. Tales spread of berries that glowed under moonlight, or roots that only revealed their power when harvested by a woman singing the right song. Around flickering fires, you can almost hear the explorers sharing these tales, their faces painted orange by flame and wonder. Some of them laughed, others listened in silence, secretly believing. Beneath the poetry of these legends, a quieter truth persisted. These plants were not fantasy. They were real, tangible, potent. Their aromas were not illusions. Their effects were measurable. Gradually, sailors, healers, and botanists began the slow work of study. They collected samples, dried leaves between pages, and boiled roots to test their potency. Still, the process was agonizingly slow. Without the frameworks we now take for granted, taxonomy, chemistry, pharmacology, each step forward was based on observation, intuition, and patience. The plants gave up their secrets only reluctantly to those willing to wait and return. And that's the heart of this journey, patience. In a world now obsessed with speed, downloads in seconds, answers in milliseconds, it's easy to forget how long true discovery takes. In those early days, every new leaf collected, every seed carefully stored, every drawing inked with trembling hands was a small victory over ignorance. There were no shortcuts. Knowledge had to be earned in hours of watching, tasting, listening. You might pause here and reflect. Even today, when we use cinnamon in a pastry or sprinkle nutmeg into a drink, do we recognize the centuries it took to truly understand those plants? How many experiments failed before the right preparation was found? How many dangers were braved to bring a few seeds home? Historians still argue over how much of this native knowledge was freely given and how much was kept hidden, either through mistrust, spiritual protection, or sheer cultural divergence. The relationship between indigenous peoples and European explorers was not a single story. It was a spectrum. Sometimes there was genuine curiosity and exchange, other times misunderstanding and exploitation. Yet despite these tensions, one undeniable result was the cross-pollination of knowledge. Seeds of understanding planted quietly between people who often had no words in common. It's humbling to imagine those moments of miscommunication and discovery. Explorers fumbling with unfamiliar tastes, unable to describe them in their native languages. Botanists attempting to assign Latin names to plants that already had dozens of local ones. Sailors turning their noses up at spices they would later crave. A peppercorn, now commonplace, might once have been met with raised eyebrows and wrinkled noses. And here's a detail often forgotten. Not all the plants were immediately taken back to Europe. Some were considered too delicate to survive the journey. Others were misunderstood, mislabeled, or simply dismissed. They remained behind, continuing to thrive in their own ecosystems, waiting silently for another generation to see their worth. So you continue walking, feet brushing against soft leaves, the distant smell of spice still curling in the air. Seeds drift around you, some landing in silence, others catching in your hair, in your memory. With each step, stories accumulate. The forest doesn't speak loudly, but if you listen, you'll hear it breathing, teaching. The discovery, even now, is not over. It moves at the speed of the wind, at the pace of roots growing beneath your feet. You are not racing through history, you are walking through a living story, one that was never meant to be rushed. And so the quiet quest continues, step by step, scent by scent, seed by patient seed. You wake again, or maybe you never quite fell asleep, just drifted lightly in a dream-like haze, carried by the hush of waves and the distant perfume of unknown groves blooming somewhere far beyond the horizon. The rhythm of the sea has folded itself into your breath. The path you followed has changed. Earth softens to sand, then sand to sea, and you are no longer walking. You're aboard now, somewhere between the comfort of the old and the whisper of the new, somewhere between memory and mystery. The timbers of the ship creak beneath you like old bones, like quiet conversation. Around you, the slow, steady breathing of men who no longer count hours, but whines. You sit still. You listen. You wait. This is no voyage of urgency. You are not here to conquer. You sail not for gold, not for glory, but for wonder, for the scent of something not yet known, for the whisper of a story waiting to be found in leaf or bark or seed. The world around you moves slowly, achingly slow by today's standards, with favorable winds, maybe 3 or 4 knots, the speed of a lazy bicycle meandering through a sleepy village. You measure time not in minutes or miles, but in sunrises, in shifts of breeze, and how long it takes for a thought to drift in and out of your mind. The air is thick, not unpleasantly so, but with the quiet tension of anticipation. Spice clings to everything. There's the tang of citrus, lemons, and oranges tucked away to guard against scurvy. The faint trace of cloves, sharp and smoky, packed into the sailors' pouches like lucky charms or tokens from faraway temples. These spices are not just trade goods. They are hope made tangible, scented evidence that the stories told in firelight might just be true after all. Back in Europe, noblemen wait with fraying patience. Merchants dream in currency and quantities. To them, spices have become more than flavor. They are fashion, ritual, status. A pinch of nutmeg in your stew could elevate a dinner party into legend. A clove tucked behind the ear might signal elegance. Cinnamon, if fresh enough, could ward off disease or simply make your neighbors jealous. But out here on the open sea, none of that frenzy survives. Out here, time stretches and softens. There is no hurry. Only sky, sail, and silence. One morning, or perhaps it's evening, you've long lost the distinction. You find yourself standing beside a young cartographer. He has a worn map spread across a barrel, its edges curling like old leaves from exposure to salt, sun, and the heavy breath of time. But what he sketches isn't geography, not yet. What he draws is potential, the ghost of a coast, the suggestion of a bay, the rumor of a river that might, or might not, exist. You smile, and so does he, because you both understand something fundamental. Maps, like dreams, are drawn long before they are true. Did you know, he says, glancing sideways, as if embarrassed by his own words, that some sailors believe cinnamon grows in the nests of giant birds, birds that guard it with fire? You laugh, not mockingly, but with genuine delight. He grins, relieved. Even now, scholars argue whether such stories were naive or poetic. Most likely both. The cinnamon bird, a myth from Herodotus, and Arab traders may never have flown, but it carried something important in its wings. These tales were never meant to be accurate. They were placeholders for mystery. They were humanity saying, in its most beautiful way, "We don't know yet." Wrapped in feathers and flame, they gave shape to wonder. And wonder, after all, is what drives you still. By the 23rd day, or maybe the 29th, you've stopped counting. The sea has calmed. The men, once restless, now settle into rhythm. They sort through fragrant bundles collected on earlier voyages, dried chili peppers from the southern shores, strange tubers, bark that smells like honey, and fire and tiny scarlet seeds known locally as annatto. You handle them with care, not from fear but from reverence. Your fingers tingle, not from the spice itself, but from something deeper, something like time folded into scent, like history breathing softly through a plant. One sailor tells you annatto is used not just for cooking, but for painting the body, marking rituals, even protecting skin from the sun. Another jokes it's the first edible cosmetic, and laughter ripples across the deck. But beneath the laughter lies truth. In every seed, a story. In every spice, a history of survival, identity, resistance, and beauty. You wonder, silently, how many of these gifts will be understood when they reach Europe. How many will be cherished? How many dismissed as novelty, or worse, stolen, stripped of meaning, reduced to nothing but price. But for now, none of that matters. For now, you are still between worlds, in a place where value has not yet replaced meaning. These discoveries remain intact, unsold, untarnished, alive. Later that night, when the sky turns velvet black and the sea hums low and contented, you climb to the deck and look upward. Stars flood your vision, a sky broader and deeper than you've ever imagined. And beside you, the ship's navigator, old and quiet, points to a cluster of stars. "They say nutmeg grows where Orion's belt points," he murmurs. "I don't believe it, but I still look." You nod, because so do you. Scholars today still puzzle over how those early spice seekers navigated. With stars, yes, but also with instinct, with luck, with legends. The stars were not just maps. They were companions. They were poems written in light, promises in the night sky. You believed in them then. A part of you believes in them still. And when land finally appears on the horizon, soft, green, fragrant, you do not cheer. You do not rush. You simply stand, watching as the shape grows clearer, as scent returns to the air. Something shifts. The wind smells wilder. You are not just arriving, you are returning. Returning to something ancient, something that waited quietly to be seen again, to be touched, to be understood. You step off the ship with a calm you didn't have before. You step gently, as if onto sacred ground. Because this is not an end, not a climax. This is another beginning, another breath, another quiet quest. The soil here breathes beneath your feet. Soft, red, and full of something ancient. It gives just slightly with each step, as though recognizing you, welcoming you without words. The air clings to your skin, humid and heavy, making your shirt stick to your spine like a second skin. Yet it is not unpleasant. There's a sweetness in the heat, fragrances floating on the wind like half-remembered songs. Ginger pulses gently in the shadows, its aroma bold yet grounded. Cardamom weaves itself through the underbrush with a feline grace, elusive and intimate. And there's something else, bright, sharp, citrusy, hovering just beyond identification, like a memory from a dream you're not sure was ever yours. You have arrived, though it's hard to say exactly where. This is a land suspended between memory and mystery, mapped more by guesses than by names, its geography described in footnotes and faded ink. The names given to this place by its people are lyrical, rich with syllables that dance through the air. They twist the tongue and require the lips to curve upward just slightly, as if the act of speaking them must be accompanied by a smile. But naming is not why you've come. You are not here to stake claims or draw borders. You are here only to notice, to witness. The first steps away from the shoreline are wrapped in a silence not often heard anymore. Not the silence of absence, but of presence. Birds call out in short, jubilant phrases, their song playful, almost mischievous. Insects hum in a low, tireless chorus that folds around you like a blanket of sound. Leaves crackle underfoot, not loudly, just enough to remind you that you are somewhere wild, somewhere alive. Ahead of you, a guide moves steadily. His pace is not rushed, not idle. There's a rhythm to his motion, as if he's keeping time. With the pulse of the forest itself, there's reverence in his quiet. It becomes clear that this land listens, and that rushing would be rude. Mid-morning, or perhaps later, the sun above filters through the trees in dappled patterns, neither hot nor forgiving. Your arm brushes against a plant, and a sharp prick dances across your skin. Instinctively you pause, thinking perhaps it was nettle. The guide, just a few steps ahead, halts as well. He kneels near a low plant, gently plucking a small round seed from a pod. The scent released into the air as it's crushed between fingers is unmistakable. Pepper, but not the kind that sits quietly in a shaker on a table. This is wild pepper, its ancestor, its origin. Tiny, sun-dried, aromatic, potent. A spice that once weighed the same as gold, stored in vaults, hoarded like relics. Now it rests lightly in your open palm, as if it always belonged there. A wind stirs, passing gently through the trees. The branches sway almost imperceptibly, as though leaning in to listen. The forest feels aware, not in an ominous way, but with a kind of attentive quietness, as if it remembers every footstep, every story, every harvest. The deeper you walk, the denser the fragrance becomes. A grove emerges, hushed and fragrant. Cinnamon trees grow here, not grand or imposing, but slender and patient. Their bark peels in delicate curls, like old paper left to warm in the sun. A worker tends to one of the trunks with a curved blade, each movement precise and slow. The outer bark slips away with barely a sound. Beneath it, the true treasure. Smooth, golden brown inner bark, curling into scrolls of scent. There is no haste here. Every gesture is part of a ritual, carried out with the care of someone who knows the tree must be given time to heal. These trees are not exploited, they are partnered with, asked gently, and allowed to rest for years between offerings. This is not agriculture. It is something closer to communion. Later, seated beside a small fire, you cup warm water infused with roots and seeds. It tastes ancient. The heat carries more than flavor. It carries time. You sip slowly, aware that this moment is part of a larger chain stretching backward across generations. The steam rising from the cup carries with it stories of women who once brewed cardamom tea to ease childbirth, of healers who anointed foreheads with cinnamon bark in sacred rites, of merchants who risked oceans and storms for one more sack of pepper. The afternoon fades into gold, and new scents rise with the changing light. Clove trees grow in this region too, their buds tightly clustered like stars caught in early bloom. They're strange things, sharp, pungent, bold, pressed into citrus fruit during cold winters elsewhere. Here they grow under the sun's bold gaze, rooted deep in volcanic soil. There's something cosmic about them, as though they carry the memory of the sky from which they once fell. You inhale deeply. Your lungs are not accustomed to this richness. The density of the air, thick with plant life and time, makes you feel dream-heavy. Scents drift through you like lullabies, each one layered with meanings you can only begin to understand. Then comes nutmeg. A tree, unassuming at first glance, bears a pale yellow fruit. It splits cleanly on its own when ripe, revealing a brilliant red web wrapped around a single dark seed. The web is mace, equally valued, equally potent. The seed within, nutmeg, is smooth, heavy, fragrant. It smells like cold mornings and baked sweets, though this land has never known winter. The tree is slow to reveal its nature. Only after years does it declare itself male or female. Even then, not all will fruit. Some remain silent their entire lives. This, too, is part of the rhythm here. Patience is not optional. It is woven into the roots of the trees themselves. Evening arrives on bare feet, trailing the scent of smoke and spice. Somewhere nearby, drums begin to echo through the trees, not in warning, but in welcome. The beat is soft, steady, irresistible. Someone is cooking. The sharp scent of chili slices through the dusk like a playful challenge. You imagine the meal being prepared, made with knowledge, handed down mouth to mouth, hand to hand. It will be eaten slowly, with stories, with reverence. You lie back later on a woven mat, the ground beneath you still warm from the sun. The sky above is impossibly dark and endlessly star-filled. The air has shifted again, cooler, quieter, softer. The trees around you are still, as if resting. The forest sleeps with full lungs and slow heartbeats. And as you begin to drift, one thought finds you, curling through your mind like the last thread of steam from your cup. The world has followed these flavors for centuries, chasing them across oceans and through myth. But perhaps all along, they were not fleeing. Perhaps they were simply waiting. For us. Somewhere along the coast, the wind begins to shift. At first, it is subtle, barely a whisper, a nudge in the sails, a faint exhale from the sea. You do not notice it immediately. Only when the sails begin to lean differently, adjusting, their shoulders like tired birds preparing for a new direction. Do you sense the change? Beneath your feet, the ship lets out a long creak, like an old dog rousing reluctantly from sleep. The sky has worn the same color for days, a monotonous, watchful gray. Neither cruel nor kind, it hangs above like a veil, withholding judgment. You keep your coat close, drawn against the ever-present chill, and let your gaze trace the surface of the sea, as though the waves might reveal a hidden message if read long enough. Behind you lies a trail of islands, now fading into memory, the clove trees glowing in the dusk, the cinnamon groves with their hushed reverence. Their scents, once clinging to your clothes, are gradually replaced by salt and the distant scent of rain. Ahead of you waits the unknown, cloaked in mist, its edges blurred and shifting. The phrase, New World, carries a gravity it cannot explain. The land is not new, not in the way the words suggest. It is only your presence that is unfamiliar, your arrival that alters the story. Perhaps the only thing truly new is your intention, something you are still deciphering yourself. Days pass. The crew speaks less now, conversations dry, up like the rations. Meals are eaten with fewer words. Eyes linger on the pale horizon longer, waiting for a shape to rise from the sea. There is a quiet undercurrent of anticipation, as if something immense, and also very simple, is waiting just beyond the next morning. Whispers make their rounds. Red roots said to burn like flame, berries that stain like blood but smell like citrus groves, leaves that release perfumes heavier than wine. The promise of spices never listed in ledgers, unknown to the markets of Europe or the scrolls of the East. And so you sail. One evening, deep into the voyage, you are invited below deck, not for food, but for scent. The ship's cook, whose hands are rough as rope and whose movements are slow and deliberate, reveals a bundle he's kept wrapped tightly beneath his cot. Carefully, as though unveiling something sacred, he unwraps the cloth. Inside are chili peppers, dried and darkened by the sun. They are not the familiar types from the East or the small searing ones from the Mediterranean. These are thicker, deeper in color, with a scent that clings to your senses, making your eyes water and your breath catch. He grinds a pinch into a simmering broth and offers a taste. The heat rises slowly, unfolding like a memory that refuses to fade. It is not violent, it does not overwhelm. Instead, it insists, an ember rather than a blaze. You sip, and the warmth lingers, threading its way through your chest and settling somewhere deep. The sensation is vivid, like waking from a long sleep. The truth is, chili peppers did not arrive from the East at all. Their origin lies in the very land your ship approaches. They crossed oceans backward, spreading eastward with astonishing speed. Within a single generation, they rooted themselves in Indian soil, made their way into Chinese kitchens, fermented into Korean pastes. Their path was swift and a little defiant, slipping past boundaries of cuisine and culture alike. Historians still ponder the rapid adoption. Was it their intensity, their preservation qualities? Or was it something more primal, more addictive? One theory speculates that sailors became attached to their fire, unable to stomach bland food. Again, another imagines a more emotional truth, that chilies, in some strange way, echo home. The next morning, land emerges slowly. It does not burst from the horizon with drama or grandeur. There are no towering cliffs, no celebratory cries, just trees, endless trees, like quiet onlookers, neither greeting nor rejecting, simply present. You disembark onto soil that feels foreign, too still after the rolling movement of weeks at sea. The air tastes different now, sharper, cleaner, like biting into an unripe pear. Your guide here is unexpectedly young, barely an adult, with movement like breeze and eyes that flicker with alertness. She takes you inland along paths that wind like memory through forests older than cities. With each bend in the trail, she gestures toward roots and vines, speaking their names in a tongue shaped by wind and river. You try to repeat them under your breath, though the sounds dissolve quickly. Still, you try. It feels like a necessary courtesy. Midday, she stops beside a dense cluster of low bushes. From among the glossy leaves, she plucks a dark berry, gestures for you to taste. You hesitate, then relent. It bursts on your tongue, first sharp and medicinal, then sweet, then smoky. A confusion of flavors that somehow harmonize. Cinnamon, clove, nutmeg. They all seem to echo through that single fruit. And yet it is not a blend. It is allspice, you learn, a single entity that wears many masks. You find out later that allspice cannot be shipped casually. It must be harvested at just the right stage, green, still full of potential, then dried in sun until it shrivels and darkens, becoming aromatic, enduring. Its scent deepens with age. In these groves, the branches bend gently beneath the weight of the berries. You reach out, fingers brushing their rough skin. Somewhere above, a bird taps rhythmically, and the forest seems to breathe more slowly in response. Your guide tells you that the elders believe the smoke of allspice keeps the spirit world at bay, that it guards dreams, wards off what should not cross into sleep. There is no skepticism in her tone, only certainty. You do not challenge it, not here. As twilight settles, the forest exhales in gold and violet. A fire is kindled from bark that smells of oranges and pine. Into the flame she tosses a pouch filled with crushed allspice. The smoke spirals upward. Sweet, grounding, ancient. The scent holds you in place. Around the fire, the stories turn. To the moon, to the ancestors, to nights spent harvesting under stars while singing prayers into the soil. You do not understand every word, but you understand what it means. There is reverence here, not in monuments or manuscripts, but in practice. Before you lie down for the night, your guide places a small charm in your palm. Twine woven with seeds, and in its center, one dried berry. A quiet gesture of protection. You tuck it into your pocket without question. Sleep arrives gently, and with it, dreams dense with fragrance. Forests that hum, paths lined with unfamiliar herbs, faces half known, speaking languages you almost understand. When the morning arrives, crisp and pale, one truth drifts to the surface. Spices have not simply been flavors in your journey. They have been teachers, hosts, companions. Each one has shown not only how it tastes, but how it is lived with, honored, remembered. You leave the charm in your pocket. Whether it works or not, you're not ready to part with it. You wake before the sun, breath curling in the cool morning air, pale and drifting like memory. The fire has long since died, reduced to faintly glowing ash and brittle charcoal, and the world around you rests in a stillness found only at the edge of daybreak. It's not silence exactly, but a pause, a hush before the forest exhales. You move with purpose, but softly, every motion measured, as though a single misstep might shatter the fragile boundary between night and light. Your guide is no longer there, having vanished into the early shadows with the practiced silence of someone who belongs more to the trees than to human company. She has left behind nothing more than a faint print in the moss and the lingering trace of warm wood and crushed berries in the air. You wonder, if only for a breath, whether she had been real at all. But your hand slips into your pocket, finds the charm she gave you, twine wrapped around a tiny seed, still fragrant and firm. So yes, she was real. Real enough to leave a scent behind. The land has changed again. You've moved further. Inland, leaving behind the scent-drenched forests and tropical humidity. Now, flatlands stretch wide, tangled with marshes and murmuring grasses. You travel alongside traders and trappers now, rough men who carry their stories like tattoos beneath their skin, men whose laughter sounds too sharp to be kind and whose sleep is never quite complete. They trade pelts for tobacco and lies for company. Their stories blur truth and invention in equal measure, though you've learned to listen to tone more than detail. Most speak of threats, of bears, of floods, of men with muskets. But one older man, gray and gap-toothed, speaks instead of sweetness. He mentions a tree that stands along the borderlands of river and brine, a thin and unassuming thing whose bark, he claims, tastes of both sugar and flame. You don't dismiss it. Not anymore. You've learned the forest speaks in flavors, not just in facts. You part ways with the others, follow the old man's rough directions, and push on alone through mud and reeds and swarms of insects relentless, enough to feel like a test. Eventually, the trees appear, not impressive at first glance, spindly, with pale bark peeling like old parchment. But as you scrape a ribbon of bark from one trunk and bring it to your nose, recognition strikes, with sudden force. It's cinnamon, but not the kind from faraway Ceylon or sweetened packets. This scent is raw and immediate, like the idea of cinnamon before refinement. This is canela. Native to this land, sometimes mistaken for true cinnamon, sometimes dismissed as inferior, but holding its own wild brilliance. Unlike its better-known cousin, canela doesn't travel well. Dried, it loses its voice too quickly. But fresh, it sings in layers, bright and peppery, hot and strangely floral. You collect a few curls, slipping them between the allspice and dried chilies. In your bag, the satchel now smells like a caravan mid-feast, like a map made of memory and flavor. Scholars and traders have argued about this bark for centuries. Some called it a counterfeit, others a miracle. A few saw in it a medicinal marvel that the European apothecaries could never quite replicate. But most agreed on one thing: it burned quickly, too quickly, as though it resisted captivity. That evening, beneath a tree gnarled like a clenched hand, you camp alone. You boil water, crush a strip of bark, and let it steep. Steam rises in aromatic curls. You breathe it in with deliberate slowness, tasting more than just the spice, tasting the place. From the trees emerges another figure, a woman older than the guide from before, wrapped in faded layers dyed deep indigo and brown. She moves with ease, and her presence settles beside you like an old tale arriving uninvited. She observes your brew with a raised eyebrow, then reaches into her satchel and drops something small and knotted into the pot. Roots, dark, glossy, slightly crooked. The scent deepens, shifts. Ginger, but not from across the sea. Wild ginger, native, earthy, smoked with secrets. The taste, when you sip it, arrives slow and warming. A story whispered directly into your chest. This ginger is local, less known, but no less fierce. In her presence, you hear of its uses: stomach balm, sacred poultice, spice for midwinter broths. Centuries ago, she tells you through gesture and rhythm, this ginger was more than food. It was a promise, a quiet kind of strength grown in the dark soil beneath dense canopy. You've heard little of this ginger in books, maybe because it wasn't profitable enough, or maybe because it wasn't flashy. But here, in her hands and her people's memory, it's known. It matters. She leaves you with a handful of the roots, dark and coiled, warm from her skin. They smell of smoke, and honey and distant thunder. Later you climb again. The flatlands fold into hills, low and dusty, where the grass grows in tufts, and the trees stand sparse, each one solitary and stubborn. The soil feels different, less fertile, more weathered. But even here, flavor grows. You find a grove of small trees, short and strong, dressed in fine green-gray leaves and heavy with clustered berries. They don't look like much at first, but when you crush one between your fingers, the aroma is unmistakable. Pine, citrus, something cold and medicinal, juniper. You hadn't expected it. Not here, not this far south, but it thrives in defiance of expectation. Juniper is sharp, strange, calming. A berry that's not sweet but still generous. Its earliest uses blur together: ritual, remedy, seasoning. Burned to cleanse a room, crushed into spirits, carried in sachets to protect the sick. It crosses boundaries, never quite settling on one identity. You take a few and add them to your satchel. It now carries a world of scents: the warmth of cinnamon, the fire of ginger, the cool edge of juniper. A pantry of stories. As you move forward, the wind picks up, dancing through the trees. It smells of resin and sun-dried bark. In that breeze, you feel a truth that words can't quite hold. Spices are more than taste. They are memory. They are location. They are the language of a place spoken through scent and ritual and use. Every flavor you've gathered tells a story, not just of plants, but of people, not just of meals, but of moments. You carry them forward, not as ingredients, but as invitations to remember. And so you walk on, pockets full of stories, following the trail of taste into whatever horizon comes next. The trail narrows. You're no longer moving through a world that seems to welcome you with soft breezes and edible fragrances. That stage of the journey has passed. This is high plateau country now, where the sun cuts the earth at an angle so sharp it could draw blood. Shadows contract into nothing. Every rock seems to wear its age with pride, and the air, though thinner, carries a weight that you feel in your bones. Stones crunch beneath your boots like old bones laid to rest and forgotten. The sky overhead stretches taut, as if the wind had pulled it too far across the corners of the world, and it forgot how to fold back into its usual shape. A dryness clings to you, not just to your skin, but to your breath, to the inside of your mouth. You press your tongue against your teeth and taste only absence. Salt from your own exertion crusts at the corners of your lips. The once pleasant weight of your spice pouch now swings like an anchor at your side. Inside, the juniper berries rattle softly, small reminders of a different climate. They're nestled among curls of canela, dry but still potent, and the knotted, dark ginger roots that feel almost warm when you touch them. Each one has become a kind of companion, silent but vivid. You descend into a shallow valley, a dip in the land where the wind seems to forget itself. Sound vanishes, replaced by a vast silence that rings in your ears louder than any noise. The stillness feels cultivated, intentional. Your breath becomes the dominant rhythm, louder than your footfalls, louder even than your thoughts. The world here feels paused, waiting for something unnamed. That's when you notice the smoke. Not panic-thick or desperate, but thin and elegant, rising in a spiral that moves like a question or perhaps a beckoning. Its scent drifts lightly, strange and familiar all at once. You follow without needing a reason, feet guided less by logic than by scent and intuition. The trail leads to a small encampment, tucked with almost architectural precision between sandstone ridges. There is nothing decorative here, only function and fire. A slow flame simmers beneath a clay pot. The pot murmurs with the slow cadence of something ancient. The scent reaches you before anything else. It hits you with the force of memory, though you cannot name what memory it might be. It pulls at your chest the way certain music does, uninvited but undeniable. A family tends the fire. They do not rise to greet you, nor do they question your presence. You've come far. You must be tired. You must be hungry. It is simply understood. A ladle dips into the pot, and a portion is poured into a shallow clay bowl, offered wordlessly, as though offering rain to a cracked stone. You lift the bowl and drink. The flavor takes you by surprise. It does not announce itself with sweetness or salt, but with depth, an earthy gravity that grounds you instantly. Musky, slightly bitter, faintly sweet at the edges. The taste lingers long after the swallow, a ghost clinging to the corners of your tongue. It feels both medicinal and ceremonial. You realize you know this, but only distantly, like a childhood, scent you can't place. Annatto. The name surfaces from somewhere, dragging associations behind it. A dye, perhaps. A seed. Something used to tint cheese back home. But here it is something wholly different. It is not an additive, it is a foundation. The seeds come from bizarre pods, crimson and spiky, shaped like something imagined rather than grown. Inside, the seeds glow like fragments of red coral. Ground to powder, they shine golden orange. When stirred into oil or broth, the color blooms as though awakened. Here, annatto isn't just food. It's pigment, it's ritual, it's part of language, smeared across foreheads, rubbed into bark to mark what matters, mixed into stews that anchor memory to the body. Historians continue to debate its earliest uses. Some assert that annatto was used more for its vivid hue than its taste. Others claim it was central to indigenous cuisine, long before the first foreign mouth ever tasted anything from this land. Still, others believe it played a key role in ceremonies and healing, rites, used to anoint, to protect, to summon memory through color and heat. In this quiet valley, none of those interpretations seem exclusive. They all feel true at once. Later, you walk past a child drawing circular patterns on stone using annatto paste and a stick. Her fingers are stained bright red-orange, the color of autumn leaves pressed into flame. Her joy rises with the rhythm of her hands, without a word, without an audience. The act is the point. You ask, with gesture and care, to see the plant itself. You're led behind a wall of brush where the annatto bush squats low to the ground. Its pods cluster like secrets waiting to be cracked. You reach out, press one gently. It quivers in the breeze, as if uncertain whether to bloom or retreat. You're warned, without words, but unmistakably, not to take too much. Annatto, it seems, does not reward greed. It fades when hoarded. You nod, pocket a modest handful of seeds, and leave gratitude behind in the way you know how. Slowly, sincerely with your palms open, as you walk on, the scent trails behind you, caught in the fabric of your sleeve, the edges of your satchel. Bitter, warm, radiant. You carry it like a subtle music. That night, your sleep is broken, not by discomfort, but by thoughts that arrive fully formed, each one tied to a scent, a taste, a landscape. You begin to understand that you are not merely gathering spices, you are gathering stories. Each root and seed has lodged itself within you, carrying with it echoes of people, ceremonies, decisions, griefs, and small joys. The weight of that knowledge presses against your ribs, not heavy, but constant, like a hand resting on your shoulder. Morning comes gently, the land softens. The red earth undulates in low curves, hills that feel like thoughts just beginning to form. Pockets of green dot the trail where water once lingered, pretending still to remain. You pause, beside a bush, low, wide-spreading, laden with deep green fruits like miniature plums. You pluck one, bite into it, and immediately regret the decision. The taste is astringent, so dry it pulls at your gums, so sour it makes your eyes water. A poor choice, made in curiosity, but as you wipe your mouth and recover, you learn. The fruit is capuli, American black cherry. Misunderstood at first bite, but transformed through time. Dried, it becomes rich and complex. Crushed, it brings depth to sauces. Fermented, it weaves its own song. The bitterness fades when respected. It rewards patience. You're given a few pieces, sun-dried, sticky, dark. You chew carefully. The taste unfolds in layers, tart and warm, like reading a letter written by someone who knew you before you knew yourself. The fruit's past is tangled. Some tribes revered it in medicine, others in death rites. Mixed with fat and pounded into cakes, it sustained those who traveled far. In colonial texts, it's nearly invisible. Miswritten as poisonous. Misunderstood, perhaps willfully. You carry it anyway, because you know better now. Later, in the shade of a canyon wall, you rest. Ancient handprints crowd the surface above you, red ochre against stone, reminders that you are not the first to pass through this place. You crush a bit of annatto in your palm. The color smears bright against your skin. Your fingers smell like memory. Your tongue remembers the ghosts. You breathe out. The canyon does not echo. It only listens. By now, the map in your head weighs more than any parchment scroll you could carry. It is not marked with ink or etched with lines, but formed by flavors, aromas, and warmth. An invisible cartography of meals cooked in firelight and faces you barely knew but somehow remember. Your pace has slowed, not because of weariness in your limbs, though your muscles protest each mile, but because every step now feels like a gesture of reverence. You're not just traveling anymore, you're absorbing. The land shifts subtly, then all at once. Greens deepen into velvet, and the soil beneath your feet turns darker, heavier, breathing the scent of decay and birth all at once. You've entered the lowlands. The air here has heft, clinging to your skin with a moist insistence, and it carries the layered notes of blossom, earth, and water. The trees no longer stand as sentinels. They tower, vast and ancient, each one cloaked in moss and trailing vines, resembling cathedral columns erected by time and neglect. The wind moves cautiously through this place, as if afraid to interrupt a ritual it does not fully understand. You walk a trail no wider than a cow path, a churned track of mud, hoofprints, and barefoot impressions. The distant thrum begins faintly, so faint that you wonder if it's inside your own chest, but it grows louder with each step. It is not celebratory, not the bright percussion of festivity. It is heavy and methodical, work folded into rhythm. The earth pulses with it beneath your soles. You follow the sound, not because you're called, but because your questions are now bolder than your hesitation. In a clearing partially consumed by encroaching vines and the tangled green of exuberant life, you see them. A dozen figures, bodies glistening with sweat, moving in synchronized labor. They work not with machines but with machetes and mallets, focused and fluid. They're not shaping wood or stone. They are harvesting something elemental. From the trunks of the trees sprout pods, thick, ribbed, and dark brown, larger than a man's forearm. They do not hang from branches. They emerge directly from the bark, like organs pushed outward by the heart of the tree itself. These are cacao pods, and their presence feels sacred. The pods are split open by hand with swift, practiced strikes. Inside are neat rows of seeds swaddled in pale, mucilaginous pulp that gleams under the tropical sun. Children plunge, their hands into the sticky sweetness, laughing as they transfer the glistening seeds into baskets. The scent that rises is unfamiliar and layered, tropical yet reserved, like the understated cousin of more extroverted fruits. Fermentation follows. The beans are heaped into containers and shrouded beneath banana leaves. There they ferment in their own heat and moisture. They change, sweating, swelling, darkening over days. They become what they must become, slowly and unseen. You are offered one of the seeds, raw and slick in your fingers. When you bite down, the taste is startling. Sharp, citrusy, faintly sour. It is not chocolate. Not yet. It is a beginning, unrefined and alive. Later, dried beans are roasted in a clay pan over open flame. The scent wafts up, deep and warm, and it triggers something in your body, like a memory not your own. The beans are ground by hand, the paste mixed with water, pulverized chili, and spices your tongue cannot identify. The liquid produced is dark, grainy, and severe. It is not sweet. It is not meant to be. The flavor stirs something inside your chest, something primal. It awakens your bloodstream with its heat and weight, as if each molecule knows how to call the ancient forward. Cacao's history is layered and contested. Some scholars argue it was the Olmec who first tended these trees with purpose. Others insist it was the Maya, with their glyphs and rituals. Still others say it predates both, a gift passed from root to root in time's earliest hours. Regardless of the argument, one thing stands firm. It was never just food. Cacao was currency, blood substitute, holy medium. In the ceremonies of the Aztecs, cups of cacao were reserved for warriors and priests. It was used to mark marriages, seal treaties, and offer condolences to the dead. It nourished the spirit as much as the body. By dusk, you sit beneath a cacao tree, its bark ridged and warm against your spine. You watch as the villagers prepare for a moonless harvest celebration. The scent of roasting cacao mingles with corn masa and firewood. The meal is simple, tamales filled with ground cacao, steamed in glossy leaves, and passed hand to hand. The drink returns, altered by new combinations of herbs and intentions. Sometimes it tastes of smoke, other times of black pepper, and sometimes, unmistakably, of sorrow. The night unspools with music, flutes that mimic birdsong, drums that echo footfalls, voices rising not in chorus but in collective breath. No line exists between reverence and joy. Worship flows into celebration, which in turn dissolves into laughter, then silence, then more music. Time seems to circle itself. In the morning you prepare to leave, your shirt damp with yesterday's exertion, your shoes thick with red clay. Your satchel is heavier now, not just with cacao beans, but with something else, something unseen and harder to name. Before you go, they hand you a pouch of roasted cacao. The gesture requires no words. It is both blessing and reminder. You walk away slowly, your hand brushing the rough bark of the tree one last time. Its surface feels almost like skin. The path ahead winds toward other names. Vanilla, they say, waits beyond the horizon, as elusive as rain in dry season. But first come salt plains that shimmer like illusions, and mosquito-riddled swamps that test your will as much as your body. You take a final sip of the bitter drink, now lukewarm and still potent. It tastes like smoke, earth, and something close to truth. As you walk, your steps no longer mark distance but meaning. You begin to wonder if each new flavor isn't simply a taste, but a memory in disguise. And if perhaps with enough of them carried carefully in your body, you will one day become a story yourself. The cacao still lingers on your tongue, soft and bitter like a secret not meant to be kept. But the road doesn't allow you to linger. You move west, where the air thickens, heavier than before, and the horizon stretches so wide it seems capable of swallowing thoughts whole. The terrain flattens into a long, unforgiving plain, barren, salty, shimmering with a heat so sharp it seems to hum beneath your skin. Salt flats. They call them desolate, lifeless, a cruel mirror to the sky above. But you find something else here, a strange, silent clarity in walking where even the wind forgets to speak. The ground crunches beneath your boots, brittle and white like shattered porcelain strewn across the earth. Your reflection, warped and fleeting, dances at your feet, doubled by heat mirage, then erased entirely by a wandering gust. By now you've learned that the emptiest places often cradle the deepest silences. And that silence, if you let it breathe, begins to form its own kind of music, a stillness you feel more than hear. By the third day, your skin begins to taste like the sea, dry and salted, etched with sun and time. A solitary trader appears on your path, a wiry figure with cracked lips and shoulders browned by countless suns. He walks with 2 donkeys, their pace slow and steady, as if time itself yields to his rhythm. Slung across the animals' sides are bundles wrapped in reeds, stiff and glinting, thick chunks of salt hauled like treasure through this vast, sunburnt emptiness. He walks beside you for a while. There's something unspoken in the company, like shared breath in a place where even shadows hesitate to linger. Eventually, at the edge of a shallow river, your paths diverge. The salt surrenders to green, though reluctantly. The earth here is cautious, wary, as if it still remembers droughts. But suspicion by now feels familiar to you. You wear it like an old cloak. Then, the trees begin again, but they do not rise tall. Instead, they bend low, gnarled and knotted, as if shaped by memory more than sunlight. You've reached the edge of the marshes. The air here pulses with life. Dragonflies stitch invisible patterns between reeds. Frogs send strange broken songs into the evening air. Somewhere beyond the thickets, 1,000 eyes remain unseen, yet you feel them track your every step. You push deeper through reeds that tower above your shoulders. Your shoes are soaked, heavy with brackish water. Each movement through, the muck produces a soft sucking sound, as if the land itself is reluctant to let you go. If the salt flats were silence, then this place is whisper, constant, urgent, and impossible to decipher. Then you smell it. Sweet, sharp, earthy, vanilla. The scent is so subtle it nearly escapes notice, yet something within you recognizes it before your mind names it. Like a dream half remembered or a song heard long ago, you follow it. Not with certainty, but with instinct honed by weeks of listening to the land. And there it is. Vanilla doesn't call attention to itself. Its vines climb quietly, almost shyly, up the trunks of taller trees. The pods are slender and green, curved like punctuation at the end of a thought. They grow slowly, delicately, as though time were something to steep, not spend. The people here move with the same quiet purpose. They live in houses raised above the water, their hammocks swaying between beams. Their hands are marked by the oils of the curing pods, stained dark by time and repetition. They teach you that vanilla begins not with the fruit, but with the flower, fragile, fleeting, needing human hands to help it remember how to become. The pollination is done by touch, by guidance, a small motion, a breath held. The work is done with tenderness, not force. One pod, if it chooses to grow, will need 9 months to ripen. Then it will be harvested, scalded briefly, wrapped, and left to sweat beneath the sun again and again for weeks. Only after this patient devotion will it offer the fragrance you chased through the marsh. The flavor comes later still. Vanilla has been misunderstood, labeled plain or dull. But you learn it is anything but simple. There are over 200 compounds in a single cured pod, each responding differently to heat, to mood, to memory. Scientists argue over its comforts, whether they are chemical or cultural, imagined or inherited. You believe they are both. You taste it in a thin syrup stirred into warm water. No cream, no sugar, just warmth and aroma. It settles in your nose more than your tongue. It doesn't shout. It lingers. It smells like kindness, and something older than kindness, grace. That night you lie in a hammock strung above the water, the scent of vanilla lifting faintly from your skin like an offering. The stars above are scattered, as if the sky forgot its own structure and simply spilled. Near a small fire, you watch a bundle of brittle vines tossed into the flames. They are the remnants, the ones that gave nothing. Even vanilla has its ghosts. Historians still debate the true origin of this orchid vine. Some trace it to the Totonac, others to the Maya, and still others to coincidence or divine error. But all agree it was sacred. It was mixed with cacao in rituals, offered to gods, to lovers, to memory itself. It was never meant to be common. You stay longer than you intended, because the people do not hurry, because the vines ask nothing of you but attention, because waiting here begins to feel like a form of worship. You notice after some time that your breath has slowed, your steps have grown lighter, your hunger has turned inward, more contemplative than consuming. You carry the quiet, now, the way you once carried noise. Before you leave, a child presses a pod into your hand. You do not ask what it means. You simply tuck it beside the cacao, beside the salt, beside the memory. You've become a collector of invisible things, flavors. Yes, but also patience, reverence, and the subtle weight of places that do not shout. The marsh releases you gently. Ahead, a narrow trail leads south, and beyond that, the sea. Not loud, not crashing, just breath, held, and then let go. They say cinnamon grows near the coast. You intend to find it. Your feet sink slightly into the wet earth as you follow the narrowing trail through the reeds. The scent of vanilla clings faintly to your clothes, mingling now with the promise of salt in the air. Not the crystalline kind you crunched beneath your boots, but the living, breathing scent of the sea. It draws you forward like a lullaby half-remembered, like the comfort of someone humming through a closed door. You recognize it not just with your nose, but with your chest, with that deep part of the body that seems to stir in the presence of something both familiar and unknowable. The wind carries seagull cries overhead, and the sky takes on that pale, bleached hue that always means you're near the ocean. The air becomes a little cooler, though still threaded with heat. You crest a small rise and see it at last, wide, flat, immense, like a book left open too long. The horizon melts into the waves. There's no clear division between earth and sky, and maybe there never was. It's less a border than a gesture, one medium yielding to another. You pause as if your breath might disturb the stillness. It doesn't. The sea simply receives. You descend toward a fishing village nestled in a crescent bay. Low huts with wide porches line the beach, and fishing nets hang like lace curtains across weathered posts. Dogs bark lazily and children run barefoot through the sand, shouting at invisible foes or chasing nothing at all. Smoke from breakfast fires curls upward, caught in the breeze. You smile, because even play has a rhythm here, measured and unhurried. It's the kind of place where time seems to stretch between breaths, where morning arrives not with alarm, but with gentle suggestion. You notice an old woman seated on an overturned boat at the edge of the tide, her toes buried in wet sand, her hands busy with something careful. She's stripping bark from a long, thin branch, peeling it away in soft curls that fall like shavings of memory. There's a precision to her motions, practiced, tender, without rush. Cinnamon, you understand, though not the kind most people know. This is something older, something quieter. You sit beside her, curious but silent. She continues her work, and after a moment you reach for a piece of bark. It's warm to the touch, oddly fragile. You snap it gently, and it breaks, with a soft sigh, releasing a scent that is surprising, lighter than you expected. Sweet, yes, but also floral, almost wistful, like the smell of old books or pressed flowers found between forgotten pages. It has the quality of something both present and slightly vanished. Most of the world, you reflect, has tasted cassia and called it cinnamon. Stronger, bolder, sharper. But Ceylon, true cinnamon, is delicate, faintly citrus, softer than a whisper. It doesn't demand your attention. It waits to be noticed. You chew the bark and feel it crumble like paper between your teeth, leaving behind a trace of sunlight and memory. It is not overwhelming. It is invitation. You think about the process, the way cinnamon bark must be harvested during the rainy season, when the trees are swollen with water and the skin peels easily. The inner bark is scraped and rolled into quills by hand. No machines, no shortcuts. It must be dried slowly in the shade, never in full sun, or it loses its softness and becomes bitter. And bitterness, you remind yourself, is the enemy of comfort. The phrase repeats in your mind like a mantra, soft and looping. Ancient traders once guarded the source of cinnamon with myths. They invented stories of giant birds gathering the bark from unreachable cliffs, or of serpents who hoarded it in hidden grottos, because the truth was too fragile to survive the greed of the market. Real things, you realize, are often too soft for commerce. They must be disguised to endure. Historians, as always, still argue. Some say cinnamon was among the first spices traded over great distances, reaching Egypt as early as 2000 BCE. Others claim its rise came later, during Arab dominance of the trade routes. There are tales of the Portuguese seizing Sri Lanka with fire and chains, branding the bark as their own. The details blur with time, but the shadow of conquest always lingers in spice. You spend several nights in the village sleeping, in a small hut facing the sea. At dawn, fishermen return with buckets of silver-scaled catch, and you help them gut and clean under the rising sun. Their hands work quickly, their motions rehearsed by generations. At dusk, you sit by a fire made from driftwood, sipping warm water steeped with cinnamon and listening to stories spun from brine and breeze. No two stories are the same, but they all carry the same undertone: salt, laughter, and a faint ache for things that pass. One night, someone recounts the tale of a ship that vanished, chasing a phantom freighter said to carry a hull full of spices. Another claims that cinnamon trees weep sap only during a full moon. And someone else, younger and half-drunk, insists that cinnamon's true magic is not in its taste but in how it lingers, on breath, on fingers, on memory. You decide they're all right. Every version of the truth belongs. Eventually, the sea begins to change. Its rhythm shifts, the waves roll deeper. The tide speaks with a different cadence. It is not a rejection, but a signal. A whisper that your time here is finished. You begin to pack your things. The pod of vanilla, the cacao beans, the wrapped salt, and now the cinnamon curls. You've begun to think of them not as ingredients, but as chapters. Not spices, but markers of a quiet pilgrimage, each one waiting to be steeped into whatever comes next. Before you leave, you walk the shore once more. The old woman is gone. The boat she once sat on is upright now, ready to launch. Her footprints have been erased by the tide, or perhaps they were never allowed to settle. You don't look for her. Some presences are meant to remain incomplete. You walk until the village shrinks behind you, until the palms thin into scrub and the road turns inland again. The terrain changes subtly. You pass low hills and terraced fields, where women bend at the waist, planting things you can't yet name. The soil is redder here, richer, and the air carries the scent of clay, husks, and firewood. Your steps slow, not from fatigue, but from wonder. A boy dashes past, barefoot, grinning, waving a stalk of something thick and green. He shouts a word in a language you don't speak, but you tuck it into your mind anyway. Words, like spices, sometimes bloom long after they're heard. Ahead, smoke rises in lazy spirals from a cluster of homes built close together. You catch the scent of rice steaming clean and comforting, and beneath it, something sharper, more complex, not familiar but promising. You follow it like you always do, toward the next spice. The air grows hotter now, heavier. Not in the sweltering way that demands retreat, but in a way that slows your limbs just enough to make you notice each movement. Even your breath shifts, longer, more intentional. You draw in a slow inhale, and there it is again. That scent you couldn't place back at the edge of the terraced fields. It's richer now, more layered, weaving itself into the back of your throat like a story retold in a new language. You taste it before you even see the source, something warm, something ancient, something that bites back, just a little, then lingers, daring you to follow. You arrive in the market of a lowland city that stretches out in coils, unplanned, as if it had grown from the ground like a root system, guided not by blueprints, but by instinct and heat. The streets twist, dip, and rise unpredictably, like veins across a palm. Buildings huddle close together, painted in layers of once bright colors. Reds faded into blush, oranges bleached to coral, blues softened into dust. Shade is currency here. Awnings ripple overhead like sails catching the wind, strung between homes, shops, temples, and the tangled ambitions of generations. And the spice, there it is. You smell it fully now, not just in passing, but like walking into a memory you didn't know was yours. It hits you like two timelines colliding, memory and prophecy meeting mid-step. Pepper, black, white, green, even red, piled in small pyramids, on sun-bleached mats, scattered across baskets, glinting like beads on threads of trade and time, crushed in mortars with rhythmic force, hung in braided ropes from door frames like garlands of heat. Peppercorns rattle like tiny stones in baskets as vendors shift, sweep, and stretch, adjusting their displays to greet the day's arrivals. Some of the piles are coarse and wild-looking, jagged and dark. Others are smooth and polished, like jet beads intended for some lost ceremonial necklace. The scent curls into your nose and down your throat, sharp and assertive. It isn't pleasant, it's thrilling. The first taste stings. You chew instinctively on one peppercorn, unthinking, and it flares like fire in your mouth. Your eyes water, your breath stumbles. It's not pain exactly. It's revelation. Something inside you wakes up. The air tastes different afterward. Every breath, heightened. Every exhale, alive. You learn that pepper was once a currency, unto itself. Its value transcended taste. It became status, leverage, obsession. Historians still debate the precise moment pepper became precious. Some trace it to the monsoon-fed groves of southern India, where vines wrapped around the trunks of trees, like secret intentions, and reached for the rain. Others point further west, to Roman decadence, when emperors burned vast stores of pepper in funerary rites, offering spice to the smoke as if it might flavor grief. But regardless of where the story begins, one truth remains unshaken. For centuries, pepper ruled the pulse of global trade. In medieval Europe, peppercorns were counted one by one, tucked into ledgers like coins. They were used to pay rent, to settle disputes, to measure worth. Bags of pepper determined dowries and drew the paths of caravans. Merchants crossed blistering deserts, forded rivers, and tempted war just to secure a barrel's worth. Cities flourished and fell depending on who controlled the pepper ports. When the Portuguese reached the Malabar coast, they claimed the vines not as guests, but as owners. You witnessed the spice in use, A vendor tosses peppercorns into a hot pan, their skins snapping open with dry crackles. The air thickens, and you sneeze uncontrollably. The scent turns sharper still, clean, smoky, electric. All around you, the city pulses with pepper's presence. It's not a product here. It's life. Children chew on fresh green peppercorns like candy, wincing and laughing through the sting. Old women carry pouches of crushed black pepper to stimulate their hunger. Fishermen smear their catch with thick pepper paste and leave them to dry on rooftops, the air above their homes shimmering with spice. You're taught, with gestures and demonstration, the nuances of pepper grating. There's Malabar, dark, sun-soaked, biting. Telecherry, larger, oilier, with a fuller burn. Lampong, milder, fruitier, from further east. Each has its own heat profile, its own story of soil and sun, and then there are whispers of long pepper, a slender cousin, nearly forgotten, whose fire rises slowly and lingers with a heat that feels emotional more than physical, like an insult that lives in your chest. You join a family one afternoon in their courtyard. The grandmother grinds pepper by hand, using a stone pestle worn smooth by repetition. Her arms carry the strength of decades. Her grandson, maybe 7, waves a fan over trays of drying spice. You try to help. Your muscles protest almost immediately. She watches with mild amusement but does not stop you. The work is part rhythm, part endurance, part inheritance. You take breaks often, sipping water steeped with lime and jaggery. The mixture cuts the fire, but not the intensity. Around you, palm trees sway gently, casting fractured shadows. On the courtyard tiles, a song hums nearby, low, circular, without beginning or end. It doesn't demand your attention, but you find yourself following it anyway. At night, you lie on a woven mat, your skin still tingling with the ghost of pepper. The air is quieter now. The city breathes more slowly after sundown. Somewhere, in the distance, fireworks pop against the night. Tiny bursts of brightness marking a birth, a marriage, or simply endurance. You dream of vines coiling skyward. You dream of branches heavy with possibility. You dream of flavor as fate. The next morning, you leave before the market wakes. The streets are quiet, but not empty. A few oxen pull carts that creak in protest. A rooster calls somewhere, and the scent of wet clay lifts faintly from the road. The sky is pale, mist-blurred, and your footsteps leave prints in the soft dust that will vanish before noon. As you pass the final rows of painted houses, a boy runs from a doorway and presses a cloth pouch into your hand. It's rough cotton, hand-dyed, and stitched with the outline of a tear-shaped leaf. Inside, you feel the rattle of peppercorns. You tie the pouch to your belt without ceremony. It swings at your hip like a charm or a memory. You walk, on climbing now. The land rises slowly. The trees change shape, shorter, denser, more guarded. The air grows thinner, less pungent. The smell of pepper fades behind you, and something new begins to emerge. Green, bitter, sharp, a scent with its own challenge. You pause at a bend where rocks lean toward the sky, and below them, a cluster of homes waits. Laughter rises briefly, then silence. Then something unmistakable, a scent that dances between sweetness and fire. You follow it. Always. You follow it upward, not with urgency, but with that steady hunger only quiet quests can breed. There's no rush, only rhythm. Each step earns its place in the trail, and your legs ache in a way that reminds you they are real. That motion is sacred. The air grows thinner, but also more lucid, as if altitude clarifies not just the body, but also the mind. The light changes too, no longer scattered, but filtered through the forest canopy in vertical bands, golden and precise, like the bars of some great silent cathedral. You feel the hush, not as absence, but as presence, a weight, a permission to listen. The scent that guides you remains elusive. It dances just ahead, teasing, pulling, vanishing. Sometimes it's nothing but breeze. Then, suddenly it surges, sharp, green, with a whisper of citrus, but edgier, like something alive. Something metallic clings to the edge of it, like the scent of rain before a thunderstorm, that charged moment when the air itself feels like it might ignite. You begin to notice the leaves. They're different now. Their sheen is deeper, as if waxed by some invisible hand. They glisten even in shade. Their veins twist like etched code, not random, but unreadable. You pause to touch one. It's cool and firm, with a texture like polished leather. There's a presence in these leaves, a tension just beneath the surface, as though they're not merely part of the landscape, but watchers of it. The path narrows into a ledge that curls along a ridge. There you see a woman, still, as a carving, standing with a machete slung over her back and a coil of roots in her hand. Her presence feels ancestral, grounded. She doesn't offer invitation, only acknowledgement. A single nod, the kind that speaks of old knowledge and older silences, the kind that tells you you've arrived not at a place, but at a moment in a long, ongoing story. She crushes one of the roots beneath her heel and lifts it toward you, wordlessly. The scent is immediate. It slices upward into your head like a blade of brightness. It's not simply citrus, not quite ginger. It's like the two had collided in secrecy under a moonless sky and emerged as something stranger, more potent, more untamed. You learn that the root is galangal, a cousin to ginger, but far less polite. Here, it doesn't come in powdered form or sealed jars. It grows curled in the red soil, grasping like knuckles, clenched with history. It thrives in the filtered light beneath beetle palms, its limbs interwoven with vines and shadows. Its form is not cultivated, it's claimed. Every curve in its body seems to defy prediction. It is wild in the truest sense, not feral but free. You remember tasting galangal before, faintly, distantly, in a soup that felt foreign and unnamed, a background note, something that hummed behind the broth. But here, in its raw, living form, it is no background, it's declaration. It doesn't wait to be invited, it introduces itself. The woman walks ahead. Her steps are light, sure, barefoot on the forest stone. The machete swings gently against her thigh with the rhythm of knowing. The path she takes is not a trail, but a memory, passed down footstep to footstep. You follow in silence, feeling yourself part of something older than choice. You come to learn that galangal has been part of this place for longer than memory allows. Before kings, before traders, before counting. Some say it was a food for spirits of the jungle. Others whisper that its scent repelled tigers. Truth here doesn't rely on proof, only persistence. And galangal persists. Historians, still, argue over galangal's journey. Some trace its spread to monks traveling eastward, who used it not just for food, but as an infusion of strength, clarity folded into root form. Others believe it rode on the backs of spice caravans, confused with ginger until it proved otherwise. A few outliers claim that galangal once rivaled even saffron in value, that in some forgotten court, it was hoarded, weighed, revered. Later, beneath a fan of banana leaves, the woman opens a stalk of galangal with swift precision. The biu, inner flesh gleams, pale and golden, like a sliver of preserved sunlight. You taste it raw. The heat isn't like chili. It doesn't burn. It shimmers. It moves through your body like voltage. It electrifies your tongue, tightens the skin at the back of your neck, and floods your mind with sharpness. It demands presence, not pain. It's alertness, condensed. That evening you find yourself in a gathering that's not quite a festival, but something deeper. A shared ritual. A circle around a low fire. Children run barefoot in the dust, their voices echoing. Roots. Roast on the edges of flame, blistered, sweetened, softened. Elders sit in silence, sipping something aged and fermented. Clay cups pass from hand to hand. The galangal is there too, mellowed by time, but still singing, still wild. No one asks you why you're here. They don't need to. The air itself has brought you. And here, that is reason enough. Later, a woman sings. Her hair is streaked with silver. Her voice is low, deliberate, weathered like driftwood. The song has no urgency, only gravity. You don't understand the language, but you understand the weight. She sings of storms, migrations, root systems that outlast empires, flavors that defy forgetting. And in that moment, beneath the woven canopy of leaves and stars, you feel the ground itself breathing beneath you. Slow, steady, ancient. The earth here doesn't rush, it waits. That night the scent of galangal clings to your skin, into your pores, beneath your nails. It embeds itself in the folds of your clothes, behind your ears, at the base of your throat. You sleep with it close. You dream of roots twisting underground, of taste as legacy, of stories told without words. Before dawn, you wake to find the woman already working. She grinds root with the same stone her grandmother once used, pressing circles into memory. She hands you a bundle, dried galangal, tied with a vine. It's heavier than it should be. You feel its weight in your palm, and you understand. You begin your descent. The mist thickens as you go, curling around your knees, swallowing the trail behind you. The scent of galangal fades, but never fully disappears. It lingers, not as smell, but as signal, as memory, as promise. And now, you'll recognize it always, like a warning, or a welcome, or both. Top of form, bottom of form. As you descend from the highlands where the air was laced with galangal and mystery, the atmosphere shifts with each step. The temperature softens. The sharp clarity of altitude gives way to a heavier, more saturated warmth. The air grows thicker with moisture, curling around your arms and throat, sticky with hints of salt and ferment. You begin to taste the ocean long before you see it. Its presence announced by the faintest whisper on the breeze, a briny promise carried on the wings of wind. The terrain changes beneath your feet. Forest gives way to lowland growth, and the stately palms of the interior gradually yield to tangled mangroves, their roots like grasping fingers in the mud. The scent of galangal fades, lingering only in memory now, less a guide than a ghost of the heights you've left behind. Here, near the edge of sea and soil, everything feels slower. The air no longer moves with urgency but rolls in. Languid eddies, the way waves curve and return. You step out from the shelter of trees and into a landscape etched by water and shaped by time. Tidal plains that breathe in and out with the moon, where villages rise not on solid land, but atop wooden stilts and drifting docks. The world has flattened out into gleaming reflections and mirror-still surfaces, interrupted only by the slow passage of narrow boats that cut through the water like needles through silk. You hear the rhythm first, paddles dipping in, coordinated silence, moving with a deliberateness that belongs only to those who measure time by tide. The boats appear like ghosts from the mist, long and slender, hewn from single tree trunks, their surfaces darkened by age and salt. Fishermen inhabit them with the ease of old friendships, their movements fluent, shaped by decades of sun and water. Their faces are marked with creases not just of age, but of wind and salt and patience. Their hands move in gestures older than language, fingers mapping nets, mending lines, tossing baskets into the shallows without haste or worry. There is no spectacle here, only ritual, the kind that holds the weight of generations. You wander through wooden walkways, elevated just above the water, where homes perch on stilts and hammocks sway with the breath of the sea. Life here is interwoven with tide. Dogs nap in the shade of boats. Egrets stand sentinel near fish traps. Children dart barefoot across planks, laughing without looking down. And through it all drifts the scent, at first faint, then unmistakable. Warm, sweet, and smoky. It snakes through the air like incense, curling from clay stoves and woven baskets. It is the scent of cinnamon, not the diluted kind of city shelves, but the raw, ancient perfume of bark peeled fresh from tree trunks, intense and layered, touched with earth and sun. Drawn by the aroma, you come to a small clearing, where an elderly man is working beside a simple hut. He is seated cross-legged, carefully splitting long strips from the bark of a cinnamon tree. Each movement is deliberate. His hands, worn and darkened by age, lift a strip, bend it, and watch as it curls into its natural scroll. The bark darkens as it dries, coiling into the familiar shape found in spice jars around the world. But here, before the jars and markets, and transport crates, it is simply wood made fragrant by time and weather. You pause, letting a strip brush against your palm. The warmth is immediate. The scent, dense and honeyed, fills your lungs with something almost ancestral. You hold the stick gently, as if it were a relic, and perhaps it is, because this, too, is a spice that shaped civilizations. Cinnamon's story stretches across the stitched seams of maps. In ancient Egypt, it was offered to the gods, mixed into embalming oils, burned in temples where prayers rose like smoke. Later, in the Mediterranean, it became treasure, its value measured in gold and power, hoarded by merchants who cloaked its origins in secrecy. The Romans wove tales of giant birds nesting near lakes of spice, desperate to obscure the cinnamon's true source. Wars were launched over less. Even now, historians remain unsure who first cultivated it at scale. Some point to the Sinhalese of Sri Lanka, whose island groves still hold some of the world's most prized bark. Others suggest the ancient traders of Yemen, who perhaps bartered knowledge long before borders existed. Whatever the truth, cinnamon's trail has always been tangled with myth and wrapped in story. Here, among the mangroves and tide-bound dwellings, the bark is not just spice. It is memory. It is lineage. You continue walking, past baskets lined with curling sticks left to dry in the filtered sun. The scent lingers in the air like a song half-hummed, impossible to forget. As the day deepens, the sky begins its slow burn into dusk. The sun sinks toward the water with practiced grace, setting fire to the clouds and laying ribbons of orange and violet across the horizon. You find a quiet spot on the beach, a place where the mangroves part just enough to reveal open water. You sit in the sand, the cinnamon stick still in your hand, warmed now not only by the sun, but by the memory of the hands that shaped it. The waves move with a hush, a soft rhythm that echoes the paddles you heard earlier. The tide brushes the shore in slow exhalations. In this moment, time feels paused, not frozen, but suspended, as if it too is listening. The fragrance of cinnamon clings to the air around you, and you realize it is not a spice that rushes. It waits. It reveals itself slowly, in layers and complexities. It rewards attention, not appetite. The distant voices of fishermen drift across the water, faint, rhythmic, like the call and response of an old song. Their words are lost in the breeze, but their presence is felt. They move across the bay just as others have for centuries, unhurried, with purpose that doesn't seek recognition. Their nets are cast not only for fish, but for continuity. Their paddles cut the water with the same certainty as the old man's knife carved the bark. As night deepens, the cinnamon's scent grows richer in the cooling air. You close your eyes and breathe deeply, knowing that this too is part of the journey, not a destination, but a pause. A moment of awareness, of stillness, and within that stillness, you feel it, the soft return of story, the kind that doesn't need to be told in words because it's already written in bark and salt and smoke. In the quiet, you sense the truth. Somewhere in the endless rhythm of tide and trade, the secrets of cinnamon are still waiting to be found. Not in history books, not in archives, but here, where the water touches the trees, and the air carries the memory of every boat that ever passed. And you, in your stillness, are now part of that tide. The coastline gradually dissolves behind you, swallowed by dense vegetation and the humid breath of the interior. With each step forward, the jungle thickens, its presence total, consuming the light, muffling the sound of the sea and replacing it with its own pulsing rhythm. The air becomes a tangible thing, rich with moisture and scent, wrapping around your shoulders like a damp, living shawl. The air hums with energy. Cicadas drone in layered symphonies, their metallic calls overlapping like 100 ticking clocks. Distant birds cry out from unseen heights in the canopy, their songs reverberating across leaves broad as shields. Somewhere close, a gentle rustle breaks the pattern, a small creature stepping carefully through the leaf litter, no more than a whisper in the underbrush. You find yourself slowing without thought, your pace adjusting to the cadence of the jungle. Here, urgency dissolves. Each breath is slower, deeper. The forest seems to extend a quiet invitation, to pause, to listen, to become part of its unhurried dance. The path is half-formed, winding between mossy stones and the high-reaching roots of colossal trees. Their trunks are wrapped in vines and lichens, bark worn and grooved by the centuries. Every surface teems with life. Tiny ants marching in lines, mosses absorbing the light, orchids blooming in crevices no hand could reach. You're not just walking through the jungle now, you're being absorbed into it. Eventually, the trees part in a small clearing, a pocket of light in the thick green ceiling above. Sunlight pours down in shafts, golden and dense, like liquid amber. Dust motes swirl lazily in the beams, and there, climbing silently up the trunks of ancient trees, are wild pepper vines. The vines look almost shy, blending into the chaos of leaves, but their peppercorn clusters hang boldly, green, tight, fragrant. This is no cultivated plantation. These vines grew here untamed, in the fertile cradle of earth and rain and sun, long before empires learned their name. You kneel to examine them, gently plucking a few of the young peppercorns. Still, tender. When you crush them between your fingers, a wave of heat and earthiness rises at once, immediate and unmistakable. It tingles the nostrils and sharpens the senses. This is the beginning, the place where black pepper, the so-called king of spices, begins its slow ascent from forest floor to kitchen table, from native soil to global treasure. And this king, here you remind yourself, was never just a spice. It was currency. It was ambition. It was the spark behind many of history's most daring voyages. You recall how, across centuries, pepper traveled from these humid jungles into the gilded halls of Europe. In the Mediterranean, its fame grew so immense that it spurred not only trade, but conflict. It stirred crusades, inspired explorers to risk uncharted seas, and lined the coffers of empires. The pepper trade helped make Venice a maritime superpower, its merchants locked in fierce rivalry with Portuguese and Dutch fleets, each vying for dominance over this small, pungent fruit. And yet, despite this weight of history, something quieter speaks to you now. Here in this sun-dappled glade, away from maps and markets, pepper reveals its truest nature, not as a commodity, but as a living presence. These vines are tended not by ships or soldiers, but by rain and patience, by hands that do not seek profit, only sustenance. You think of the generations of people who came before, who knew the land not as a resource, but as a relative. To them, pepper was not a symbol of conquest, but a part of life, woven into medicine, myth, and memory. You peer closer and notice the tiny flowers hidden among the leaves, pale, near-invisible things that nod in the warm breeze. Delicate, fragrant, and fleeting, they reveal another dimension of the plant, one less known. In the villages that dot the jungle's edge, elders still remember that these flowers once held medicinal value, used to soothe aches, clear the mind, and warm the body. Pepper's power wasn't limited to taste. Its heat was thought to awaken, not just the palate, but the spirit. These stories linger, passed down not in books but in songs, in whispered recollections shared under starlight. They are remnants of a knowledge older than trade, older than even memory itself. Drawn by a faint trickling sound, you follow a narrow path to a nearby stream. The water runs clear and slow, sliding over smooth stones, its surface flashing with the light of the lowering sun. You kneel beside it, cupping your hands, dipping your fingers into the coolness. The chill surprises you, a gentle shock against the warm air. As you watch the water ripple, your reflection shimmers and breaks, distorted by current, like a dream bending under the weight of time. Nearby, half hidden in a thicket of fern, you discover an old mortar and pestle, carved from dark stone. Moss grows along its base, and yet the basin remains intact, a quiet monument to those who came before. You touch it, feeling its roughness beneath your fingers. It is not merely a tool, but a symbol of transformation. Once spices were ground here by steady hands, turned from wild fruit into powders that flavored meals, healed wounds, or sanctified rituals. Each grinding was a gesture of intention, of meaning. The act itself was slow, purposeful, almost sacred. You imagine the smell of crushed pepper rising from that bowl centuries ago, mingling with turmeric, clove, or ginger, scents that told stories of land and lineage. The jungle surrounding you still seems to breathe with a kind of timeless patience. It makes no demands. It offers no declarations. It simply is, unfolding in slow rhythms. And in that rhythm, you feel the pepper's journey mirroring your own. Like the vine, you've climbed through layers of curiosity and context, rooted in silence, reaching toward understanding. This is no linear path. It is a spiral, each step returning you to a deeper version of the same truth. As twilight begins to settle, the sky beyond the canopy dims into hues of violet and deep green. The forest transforms, shifting from light to shadow, from presence to suggestion. Insects take up their evening chorus. Leaves whisper in a language you almost understand. You lean back against the thick trunk of a tree, its bark coarse and grounding. The pepper's scent lingers on your skin, warm, earthy, complex. You inhale it deeply, not just as aroma, but as reminder. You think of all the quiet quests, the long journeys that pepper has inspired, across oceans, across time. You think of how something so small could move ships, stir kings, and yet grow unnoticed on a forgotten vine in a sunlit patch of jungle. The world may rush forward, obsessed with speed and spectacle, but here, in this pause, you remember a different kind of power. A power born not of noise, but of stillness. Not of conquest, but of connection. The jungle's thick, verdant embrace slowly loosens its grip as you emerge into a place where the landscape feels somehow altered, lighter, more open, yet no less alive. Here, the soil seems richer underfoot, a darker hue that hints at centuries of decomposition and renewal. The air carries a new texture, infused with the fragrance of exotic blooms and something sharper, more urgent, the unmistakable sting of chili peppers. It greets you like a distant drumbeat, subtle at first, then undeniable, rising into awareness. There is heat here, not from the sun alone, but from the plants themselves, bold and unrepentant in their fire. Before you lies a sun-dappled clearing, alive with color. Vibrant reds, yellows, and greens dangle like festive lanterns from low bushes, glowing against the backdrop of deep, steady green. These are not timid fruits. The chili peppers demand attention, bold in color, sharp in scent, and promising intensity. You walk among them slowly, letting your hand graze the smooth skin of a ripe specimen. Even through the touch there is a subtle heat, like static electricity waiting to leap. It tingles in your fingertips, a gentle warning wrapped in temptation. It's remarkable, you think, that something so fierce once went unnoticed by the wider world. Now a staple in nearly every global cuisine, the chili pepper was once a mystery, confined to the Americas, nurtured and cherished by the indigenous, peoples who understood its true potential long before maps carried its name overseas. Its journey from the soil of the New World to the kitchens of the Old was not swift, but it was unstoppable. The chili seduced by sensation, by the thrill of its bite and the warmth that followed. Explorers, drawn by tales of strange flavors and mystical plants, carried it carefully, cradling it in ships' holds alongside other treasures. You remember reading that the chili's heat, so novel to European palates, defied expectations. Unlike black pepper or mustard, the sensation was not a flavor, but a burning, a physical experience that bordered on pain. It was not immediately welcomed, but it was never ignored. Its arrival on foreign shores introduced not only a new spice, but a new way of tasting, a revolution of the senses that changed food forever. You pause by a bush heavy with fruit, admiring the intensity of its color in the lowering light. Nearby, scattered across the soft earth, you spot a cluster of seeds, tiny, curved, almost luminous in their simplicity. They look like miniature moons, scattered deliberately by the hand of the wind. Each seed, though no larger than a grain of rice, holds the possibility of continuation. Each is a carrier of fire, a silent promise of the plant's resilience and reach. You crouch to examine them more closely and reflect on how such minute vessels have shaped continents, not just through taste, but through trade, medicine, and ritual. Long before the chili graced modern meals, it was applied to wounds, used in ceremonies, and even counted as currency in some ancient cultures. In parts of South and Central America, it was more than food. It was identity, belief, and survival. And now, as it grows here wild and unbothered, it seems to stand as both relic and prophet, rooted in the past, yet always reaching for the next hand, the next plate, the next story. As you wander deeper into the clearing, a glint of weathered leather catches your eye beneath a tangle of vines. You kneel and gently free an old journal, half buried and softened by time. Its cover is cracked, the edges curled and delicate. Flipping through its brittle pages, you land on a faded entry, its ink smudged but legible. The words speak of the Bois, first documented trade of chili peppers in Europe, a historical moment when merchants brought this fiery novelty into a world unprepared for its intensity. The writer observed that the pepper's spread was not merely a matter of taste, but a revolution in the senses. The phrase lingers in your mind, unfolding its truth in layers. You imagine the bewildered cooks of medieval Europe attempting to integrate this fierce newcomer into their stews and sauces. What astonishment it must have sparked. How many dishes were ruined before they were perfected. You can almost see their furrowed brows, their tentative experiments, their inevitable triumphs. And then the questions that followed. Where had it come from? Who had first dared to eat it? Why did it make one's tongue feel like fire but leave behind warmth, satisfaction, even craving? Historians still puzzle over the rapid spread of chili across continents. Some believe its popularity was driven by a genuine appreciation for its heat, others by its novelty or the sheer theatricality of its burn. Perhaps it was all of these at once, or perhaps something deeper, a primal draw toward what awakens the senses most acutely, a reminder that taste is never just about food, but about experience, about feeling something that lingers. The sun now dips lower, bathing the pepper field in a golden radiance. The leaves glow like stained glass, and the peppers themselves seem to pulse with inner fire. You close the journal and tuck it gently into your pack, its weight now part of your journey. You take a deep breath, the scent of chilies rising once more, a sharp perfume that ignites memory and imagination alike. On your skin, the warmth of the chili still lingers, not burning but persistent, like a story that refuses to be forgotten. You realize in this quiet moment that discovery isn't always a matter of arrival. Often, it's a slow unfolding, a deepening awareness of connections hidden beneath the surface. Chili peppers, in their boldness, in their fire, remind you that some truths are best encountered not with haste, but with openness. As twilight spreads across the clearing, you rise slowly. The path ahead is still unclear, winding back into the shadows of the jungle. But something has shifted. You are no longer just a traveler passing through. You are a custodian now, a witness to the long and patient journeys of these flavors, these seeds, these fire-hearted gifts of the earth. You carry not just stories, but something deeper, a sense of participation in the great unhurried weaving of human history and nature's enduring burning offerings. The path winds forward, carrying you past the lingering heat of chilies and into a quieter, more contemplative part of the forest. The air changes subtly as you walk, lighter, sweeter, more perfumed. It carries with it the scent of something both familiar and mysterious, a fragrance that hovers between memory and dream. The aroma is soft, not overpowering, yet it fills the senses with its warm, floral sweetness. You follow it instinctively, and soon it leads you into a secluded clearing where the light shifts, filtered through a canopy of towering trees wrapped in slender green vines. These vines spiral upward like dancers caught in slow, graceful motion. Here, amid the green tapestry of the forest, white blossoms bloom, small, star-shaped and delicate, with petals like parchment kissed by moonlight. These are the flowers of the vanilla orchid, and their fragrance floats on the air like a lullaby made of orchids and honey. It surrounds you, tucks itself into your clothes and hair, and eases its way into your breath. The atmosphere feels sacred, almost hushed, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. Vanilla, a name so common in modern times that it often implies plainness, simplicity, even banality. Yet here, in its birthplace, you're reminded of just how profoundly misunderstood it can be. Vanilla is anything but plain. It is a spice with roots deep in cultural, historical, and botanical complexity. Its story began not in laboratories or commercial kitchens, but in the rich tropical rainforests of ancient Mesoamerica, where the Totonac people were the first to cultivate and revere the vanilla orchid. For them, it held spiritual significance, its sweetness a gift from the gods, its rarity a reflection of sacred effort. You walk slowly among the vines, noting how each one coils around its host tree with both tenacity and grace. The blossoms appear fleeting, ephemeral, each one open for only a short time before fading. And yet, despite their fragility, these flowers hold within them the potential to create something that will endure, something that will be carefully nurtured over many months before becoming the vanilla bean we recognize. Outside its native habitat, you recall, the vanilla orchid cannot pollinate naturally. The Melipona bee, native only to a specific region of Mexico, was the sole creature capable of this task. Without it, the plant's reproduction stalled. That is, until the mid-19th century, when a quiet act of genius changed everything. Edmond Albius, an enslaved teenager on the French colony of Réunion, discovered how to hand-pollinate the orchid using a thin stick and a thumb. His method, still used today, unlocked the full commercial potential of vanilla and opened the door to global cultivation. It's a small detail in the grand sweep of botanical history, but it represents something vast: how human curiosity, ingenuity, and careful observation can transform the fate of a species. As you walk beneath the orchid-covered canopy, the impact of that moment resonates. This spice, now grown in faraway lands like Madagascar and Tahiti, owes its existence, in part to one young hand and one quiet idea. A reminder that not all revolutions come with fanfare. Some arrive silently, wrapped in the slow rhythm of labor and patience. You stop beside one of the vines, bending gently to examine a developing pod. It is still green and firm, holding within it the future scent and flavor that will only emerge after months of curing. Its surface is smooth, almost waxy and cool to the touch, yet you know the transformation it will undergo, how it must be harvested at just the right time, then blanched, sweated, dried, and aged to coax out the full complexity of its aroma. That entire process can take up to a year, and every stage must be done with great care. There is no speeding it up. Vanilla, it seems, insists on time. You reflect on how fitting this is. Like the journey you've taken through the spice-laden world of the forest, vanilla embodies patience, attention, and reverence. It is a spice that asks for participation, not just consumption. A spice that reveals its gifts slowly, only to those willing to wait. Centuries ago, this patience was richly rewarded. Vanilla was considered so rare and so precious that it was once worth its weight in silver, sometimes even more. Monarchs commissioned it, nobles hoarded it, perfumers praised it, and apothecaries experimented with it. The scent alone was enough to stir fascination, desire, and even envy. And while its popularity spread rapidly, its mystery remained intact. Historians still debate whether early European obsession with vanilla was rooted in its taste or in the heady allure of the unknown, the exotic, the rare, the romanticized other. The sun begins to filter lower through the trees, casting golden beams through the canopy and illuminating the blossoms in a radiant halo. You close your eyes briefly, letting the warmth and the fragrance settle into your awareness. There is something eternal about this place, As if time moves differently among these vines, you think of the generations of hands, Totonac, African, Creole, colonial, modern, that have nurtured vanilla from flower to pod, from plant to palate. The chain is long, fragile, and often hidden, but it is unbroken. As your footsteps carry you beyond the clearing, the forest begins to thin. The dense jungle gives way to more open fields, but the scent of vanilla clings to the air like a soft memory, a whisper of something ancient and ongoing. It follows you, not loud, but persistent, like a secret folded into the seams of your clothes. You walk on carrying with you more than just the trace of a fragrance. You carry a story of interdependence between humans and plants, labor and flavor, the past and the present. Vanilla, in all its subtlety, has revealed another layer of the world's great spice journey. And as you continue forward, you begin to understand that these quiet quests, these moments of slowness, of reverence, offer not only knowledge, but a deeper connection to the rhythms of the earth and the unseen hands that shape what we taste, touch, and remember. As the vanilla-scented fields slowly recede behind you, the landscape shifts once more. The lush, humid jungle gives way to a drier, sun-drenched terrain. The path now winds through a region dotted with low shrubs and slender trees whose leaves sway gently in the warm breeze. The soil beneath your feet feels powdery and warm, and the air carries a distinctly different note. Woodier, spicier, yet familiar in a way that seems almost ancestral. It is the unmistakable fragrance of cinnamon, curling through the wind like a ribbon of memory. You pause for a moment beside a cinnamon tree, one of many in this scattered grove. Its bark is textured, fibrous beneath your fingertips, with a muted brown color that deepens where the sun hits directly. You run your hand slowly along the trunk, and a faint trace of fragrance rises into the air, dry, sweet, and tinged with warmth. The scent deepens as the tree warms under the sun, releasing its essential oils in a quiet, unhurried exhalation. It's as if the tree speaks, not with words, but through aroma, telling a story that began long before you arrived. Cinnamon's story stretches far back through human history, etched into the scrolls of ancient civilizations and whispered through trade routes that spanned continents. You recall reading how the Egyptians, with their reverence for the afterlife, used cinnamon in sacred embalming rituals. For them, this spice was more than mere fragrance. It was a form of spiritual protection, a way to guide the soul safely to the realm beyond. Later, the Romans embraced cinnamon not only for its culinary value, but also as a symbol of affluence and piety. They burned it in their temples as an offering to the gods, its rising smoke thought to carry prayers upward to the heavens. Yet for centuries, the true origin of cinnamon remained a mystery cloaked in legend. Traders from Arabia spun elaborate tales to protect their lucrative roots, claiming that cinnamon was gathered from the nests of giant birds or harvested from lands filled with serpents. These myths served not only to mystify but to monopolize. In reality, cinnamon grew quietly in the tangled forests of Sri Lanka and southern India, tended by local communities who knew its true nature, both as a tree and as a treasure. You walk farther into the cinnamon grove, where the terrain flattens and the trees are more evenly spaced. Not far ahead, a small village rests at the edge of the grove, its thatched roofs dappled in sunlight. You approach slowly and witness a scene of quiet, practiced labor. Here, cinnamon is still harvested by hand, as it has been for generations. Harvesters work with careful rhythm, using curved knives to strip away thin outer layers of bark from the branches, then gently peeling the inner bark in long, curling strips. These strips are then dried and rolled into the familiar quills found in spice jars around the world. You're struck by the elegance of the process, how something so simple can require such precision and care. There is a grace to it, almost ceremonial in nature. This is not industrial production. This is tradition preserved through skilled hands and patient repetition. Every motion reflects knowledge passed down through time, each cinnamon quill a testament to a deeply rooted heritage. You begin to see that cinnamon's fame has not dulled the sacredness of its origins. Rather, its global reach has only deepened the reverence with which it is still harvested. Your thoughts drift to the scholarly debates surrounding cinnamon's identity throughout history. You recall that historians still ponder whether the cinnamon mentioned in ancient texts was truly Cinnamomum verum, what we now call true cinnamon, or its close cousin, cassia, which is more robust and intense in flavor. The two spices are often confused, even today. Cassia, cheaper and more common, has sometimes stood in for cinnamon in trade and tradition alike. This lingering uncertainty adds another layer to cinnamon's narrative, hinting at the subtle complexities behind even the simplest seeming ingredients. As the sun sinks lower in the sky, you find a shaded spot beneath one of the larger cinnamon trees and rest for a while. You break off a small piece of dried bark from a bundle nearby, holding it to your nose. The scent is instant and enveloping, warm, spicy, and sweet all at once. It stirs something within you, a memory perhaps, though you can't place it. It's the kind of scent that feels like home, even if you've never been here before. Cinnamon has that quality. It transcends place, crosses cultures, and finds its way into the emotional corners of everyday life. You rise slowly, brushing your hands against the bark once more. The scent lingers faintly on your skin, a souvenir more intimate than any photograph or artifact. As you continue walking, you carry with you not just the story of cinnamon's journey across the world, but also the quiet dignity of the people who continue to bring it to life. Their work, their patience, their reverence, it all becomes part of the experience. Cinnamon, like every spice before it, reminds you that discovery is rarely about conquest or speed. Instead, it is about stillness, observation, and listening to what the earth has long been whispering. And here in the golden light of late afternoon, the whisper becomes clear. That flavor is memory, that scent is history, and that even in a fast-moving world, there is value in slowing down to truly savor the essence of something timeless. The sun has nearly set as you find yourself stepping into a landscape transformed by shadow and soft twilight, a place where cardamom thrives. The air here is cooler, tinged with a gentle spiciness that teases your senses like a whispered secret. The cardamom plants cluster beneath the canopy, their pods small and green, promising a subtle complexity that will unfold slowly, like a story told in a hushed voice. Cardamom's history is as layered as its flavor. You recall that it was once called the Queen of Spices, valued in ancient trade routes that stretched from the forests of India to the bustling markets of Arabia and beyond. The Egyptians used it in perfumes and incense, while medieval Europeans believed cardamom held medicinal powers capable of curing everything from indigestion to melancholy. You pause, imagining a medieval apothecary surrounded by jars of spices, carefully measuring tiny seeds like precious gems. What fascinates you is how cardamom, though often overshadowed by its flashier spice cousins, carries a quiet but persistent presence in the global story of flavor. It is a spice that requires patience. The pods must be harvested by hand, and its seeds delicately separated to release their aromatic oils. You picture the skilled hands of harvesters, moving methodically through the humid green plantations, each pod a small treasure. Historians still debate whether cardamom was the original inspiration for the spice of spices mentioned in ancient texts, or if that title belongs to something else entirely. The mystery adds to the spice's allure, as if cardamom prefers to stay just out of reach, inviting those who seek it to slow down and savor the journey rather than rush to the destination. The twilight deepens, and you breathe in the wine. Cardamom's sweet eucalyptus-like aroma, feeling a calm wash over you. It's a gentle reminder that sometimes the quietest discoveries leave the deepest marks. As the night settles, you take a moment to let the stillness surround you. The soft rustling of leaves, the distant call of nocturnal creatures, the subtle hint of spice lingering in the cool air. In this quiet moment, you realize that your journey through the world of spices has not been about rapid conquest or hurried discoveries. Instead, it's been a gentle unraveling, a patient exploration of the senses and histories that bind us all. The path ahead is still unknown, but you carry with you the richness of these moments, the gentle heat of chilies, the sweet mystery of vanilla, the warm embrace of cinnamon, and now the elusive whisper of cardamom. With that thought, you rise softly and step back into the darkness, the spices' stories folded carefully into your heart, ready to be told again when the time is right. The night deepens around you now, soft and vast, like an ocean of shadows stretching endlessly above. You find yourself wandering into the realm of saffron, the world's most precious and delicate spice, its threads like tiny golden flames that capture the fading light. The scent here is subtle, earthy, floral, with a hint of honey sweetness, and it seems to hover in the cool night air like a whispered promise. Saffron's journey is one of patience, precision, and rarity. You recall that it comes from the stigmas of the crocus sativus flower, hand-picked with painstaking care by workers who must harvest thousands of blossoms to gather just a handful of the precious threads. This tiny harvest is the fruit of an unhurried rhythm, a slow and deliberate dance between human hands and nature's delicate gift. Historically, saffron has been treasured as much for its color as for its flavor. Ancient Persians believed it held divine qualities, weaving it into their art, medicine, and ceremonies. Europeans of the Middle Ages coveted it as a symbol of wealth and power, and its price once rivaled that of gold. Yet the true origins of saffron's rise remain wrapped in mystery, with historians still debating the precise path by which it traveled from its birthplace to the far corners of the world. You feel the threads between your fingers, so fragile, yet bursting with possibility. It's a reminder of how many stories can be held in something so small. Saffron, like the other spices you've encountered on this unhurried quest, teaches you that the greatest discoveries come not from haste, but from reverence and care. As the night deepens further, your footsteps slow. The world feels wrapped in a gentle hush, the stories of the spices whispering softly as they fade into the quiet. You realize how much this journey has changed you, not just in knowledge, but in the way you move through the world with more patience, with more curiosity, and with a tender appreciation for the slow unveiling of life's hidden treasures. You pause to breathe deeply, feeling the cool night air mingle with the faint scent of saffron and distant spices still, lingering like ghosts of a journey nearly complete. Your mind quiets, and the soft murmur of the earth beneath your feet seems to cradle you, as if the world itself is singing a lullaby. Now, as the gentle rhythm of your breath slows, let the images of this quiet quest dissolve softly into the background. The lush forests, the vibrant markets, the careful hands harvesting treasures. The world slips away gently, and the voices of history and spice become a soft hum, a lullaby just for you. Rest now and know that these stories will be here when you awake, waiting patiently, as they always have, to be discovered anew. End of script. Sweet dreams.